SJ. Welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. SJ, Stongo, Gary Fife, Joho Jifkados.
Darren DeLonge, Jifkados.
Welcome to our program. Your eye on the world from the Mvskoke perspective. A couple things we have today, all by telephone, so we hope that you'll deal with us there. First of all, the sale of sacred artifacts has become kind of epidemic among many tribes who have lost sacred items, and they've ended up in auction houses, not only in this country but internationally, and France being one of the prime offenders. Let's just call it that, offenders. They think it's okay to sell that. So we'll be talking with a couple of folks from the Acoma Pueblo who have had a recent situation regarding a sacred shield and other things for their tribe that they will share with us. And in our second part
will be Allison Herrera. She is doing a bike tour, and the significance about it is the bike tour of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and she's going to be exploring like some of the history of the Mvskoke Creek Nation that's going to be that's throughout the city of Tulsa. So we're just going to talk to her about it and see where she got the idea from and where it's going to be going with it.
Oh boy, that sounds like a challenge here.
Yeah, it is, especially with it being June, the hot weather, and then. I think the thing about it is, and we've talked about it before, is like you see a lot of people. They're on their bikes. I mean, you see them on Riverside, and you see them all over the place. I mean, on college campuses. I mean, they're constantly going. They're on their bikes and everything. And so, and she's always had that hobby. So she's going to take it. She wanted to take it a step further, and that's where she is going to talk about this event.
And be traveling to sites that are important to our people.
Exactly. Yeah. I know that she's going to be covering there's certain sites that have big significance on how the Mvskoke Creek Nation came to be around in Oklahoma. So that she's done a lot of research, had done a lot of interviews. It's pretty amazing what she's gone through just to get everything ready for this.
Okay, well, I believe we have our first interview set up on the line, so let's get to it. First of all, Ann Rogers and Aaron Sims, they are the legal representatives for the Acoma Pueblo in New Mexico. Good morning, folks. Are you there with us?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Forgive me for stepping on you there. We appreciate y'all taking time here to talk about it, and we want to share the information that your Pueblo people are dealing with here. First of all, we do understand that we will not really be talking about one of the items in particular, the sacred shield and its use in your ceremonies. I understand that's something that should remain closed and not shared out in the public. So, is that correct?
Sure. This is Aaron. I'm a member from the Pueblo of Acoma, and I think that's one of the things that we've been very careful about in talking about is, in particular, this shield. And I know it's something that the Pueblo, even in terms of deciding to take action and to take kind of a public stand on this, really struggled with how much to discuss and about this shield and how it was used. I think it was inevitable that in this kind of conversation, reporters and other interested parties kind of had those questions of, well, what was that shield used for? And so, I think the Pueblo to some extent has allowed us to talk about it, but certainly, we keep it very guarded of, those specifics. It was an item that was used in, ceremonial activities. It was cared for by a particular member of the Pueblo. And it was used, I think, in the context of the well-being of not just the Pueblo, but I think in the Pueblo of Acoma's kind of worldview, for the benefit of everyone, of all of us. And so yeah, that's a kind of the background on that particular item.
Okay, well, we certainly will respect those boundaries, and I agree with you. There are many things among our people, used by our people in sacred ceremonies that should remain secret and not thrown out for public discussion. We would appreciate, anything that you can share. I know there are a lot of people that are curious, but as I said, we'll respect that situation. Maybe let's start at the beginning. When did all of this start? I guess did you find out that the shield was already gone and in Paris, or did you hear that someone was taking it over there? How did this all begin?
Last year, we noticed the shield in a catalog for an auction in France. We were not able to file documents in time to do anything about it. We literally saw it a day before the auction. And for our sakes, we were very lucky. It was not sold. It was not purchased in the auction. And then this year, we saw it come up again. As an aside, our office regularly monitors the internet and other sources of all auctions and sales to try and get cultural items returned to the Pueblo. So in the course of that, we noticed that they were offering the shield again this year. And at that point, we instituted a letter to the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Interior, and the Attorney General, explaining what this was and asking them to take action to get the shield returned to Acoma. In the past, Acoma has challenged foreign auctions unsuccessfully, and specifically French auctions, with French decision makers ruling that tribes had no standing in France to claim these items, and really foreclosing our ability to appeal the decision that we had no standing. So we did not think that filing an action in France was a way to pursue this object. We believed that it was essential to get the United States to exercise its authority in this realm to assist the Pueblo. And with our requests, this snowballed, starting with the emergency meeting at the National Museum of the American Indian, where they allowed us to make further statements. Governor Riley appeared at that on behalf of the Pueblo, as well as the traditional leader at the Pueblo. They were both at the meeting. And through this, we also learned, because we do our own little investigation here about what happened to the shield in the past, we learned that it had been stolen in a burglary many years ago. And so we filed that information with the U.S. Attorney's Office here in New Mexico, and they instituted a request for assistance under the Legal Assistance Treaty which we have with France. So we were able to bring many federal agencies into the process, and that is how we got the results that we got in this case.
And this is Darren DeLon. How are y'all doing today?
Great, and you?
Doing good, doing good. My question is, with the place that they're having the auction, the Eve auction, did whenever y'all found out that the shield was stolen in a burglary, how were they able? Did the Eve auction say that they? How did they, obtain the shield? Did they give you an answer on that?
Dan, this is Aaron. They didn't really give us an answer. I think when we first made claim on the shield, we hadn't known at that time, I think, that kind of background information. And so their kind of initial response to our just initial claim that that's a sacred item and an item of what they call cultural patrimony from the Pueblo of Acoma, their response was, that their belief is that these kinds of items can be, they're offering an opportunity for tribes to repurchase some of these items that may have been missing for quite a long time. And it's probably important to mention that, it wasn't just the auction of an Acoma item, but there were items from the Hope Tribe, from the Hoopa in California, and even I think towards the end there was an identification made by the Oglala Lakota of an item that was being auctioned. So that was kind of their general response to all of our claims on these items. But when it came to us kind of digging a little further, that's when we found out this background information of the shield's kind of history in the community, who had cared for it when it was believed to may have been taken, and I think that's maybe what pushed them over the edge to, and they didn't issue maybe a response, but their response was taking that shield off the auction block.
Oh, okay. Aaron, whenever y'all started making started going after to try and get the shield back to where it rightfully belonged, did the Hopi tribe and the Hoopa tribe, I hope I'm saying that right, did they follow suit as well with their items as well that was on the auction block?
The Hoopa tribe participated in the special emergency meeting at the National Museum of the American Indian. I believe what is a critical distinction as far as the French are concerned, not as far as anyone in the United States would be concerned, is that we could establish that the shield had been stolen.
Mm-hmm.
God, this aggravates me just to hear this thing. It's sort of like the country of France is saying, hey, we stole this fair and square and we don't care, we're going to go ahead and sell it. Is that kind of what you felt, or the reaction you got?
My initial response was, this is piracy. I find that it is piracy. I mean, it's basically saying if you can get an item to France, it's home free for all the people who are violating the laws here in the United States. And that is a real problem for me, in that cultural patrimony means it belongs to a tribe. That's part of the definition of cultural patrimony. And something was taken from a tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
So it's outside, if it's not on tribal land, unless the tribe sold it and not somebody who was hooked on drugs and looking for drug money or something like that, it's illegally obtained. Whoever has it illegally.
And maybe a good example to, I think, illustrate what we're trying to talk about for your viewers may be the Hopi had a number of items in this auction, and the type of items were very sensitive to the community, and those same very type of items in the United States, people have been convicted for the trafficking and selling of those same types of items under NAGPRA and under other criminal statutes like theft of tribal property in the United States. And so that was the kind of distinction that was frustrating, is we knew for all intensive purposes likely the Hopi items, the Acoma item, and plenty of these other items would have been subject to federal law had they been in the United States. But the mere fact that they were in France, there was this barrier of jurisdiction that the French and the auctioneers believed protected them and enabled them to, in their eyes, legally sell these items.
I read some of the background on this story, and you were getting support not only from the other tribes that you've mentioned and the National Museum of the American Indian, but the State Department. I understand Interior Secretary Jewell weighed in on this, and you got support from other tribes and peoples. At this point, had you ever thought about taking this to the White House and asking the President Obama to make an issue of this with the French government?
We did that through the State Department. We work through the federal agencies that are responsible, one, because we want them to realize it's important for them to spend their assets on it. It's very easy, especially in an election year, to go to the White House and they won't do something and nothing happens. But bringing it up through the federal agencies that are responsible gets them in the habit of responding to these requests, which is very important. For years, there have been events that have happened and the U.S. did almost nothing. And as an example, here in the Southwest, you would find items regularly at sales, at almost any kind of sale. And nothing much was happening until we got Pueblo members as the BIA special agents. In the past, one of them was a member of Acoma, and he was there. We had prosecutions. Then there were none after he retired. We now have another Pueblo member who is not an Acoma member, but a member of another Pueblo who is a special agent with the Bureau of Indian Affairs here. And he makes the effort and has the knowledge to be able to truly understand when there is an illegal taking of something, which is really important. And he's willing to spend time and energy on it.
Let me ask you this question, which may be a bit intrusive. Is there something you can tell us about this shield? Are you allowed to describe it or anything like that?
The photograph is out there in the public domain. Eve put it out there. The tribal, the traditional leadership at the Pueblo of Acoma considered and made a decision to allow us to use the photograph of the shield in this effort.
And without that permission, it would have been tantamount to blasphemy.
I'll let Aaron respond.
That's essentially right, and I think like you alluded to earlier in the show, there is a strong belief in that there's many of these things in our communities that are sacred and kept secret, and a lot of that comes from that's been the community's strength in maintaining its culture, and so that was a really tough decision, but they saw it as this may be our only opportunity to talk about this, and I know the Hopi and the Pueblo of Acoma share a lot of, I think, common cultural values. And so I know the Hopi have struggled with this also, and they have kind of maybe been more in the spotlight in the past couple years. And it's been a very difficult thing for them to engage with because of the uncontrolled nature of how the images of these items can kind of just catch like wildfire and spread, and there's no control and discussion about it. And so for the Pueblo, it was a very hard decision, but it was something that they discussed internally with their cultural leaders, and they made kind of a conscious decision to allow kind of this limited exposure for the purposes of trying to get the shield back.
Now, it seems like tribes of the Southwest are the biggest target for this sort of thing. We've heard for years that, as you mentioned, the Hopi have dealt with this problem, sacred items and kachinas disappearing and then ending up on Paris auction blocks, things like that. We have A question now, particularly Aaron. Now, how does your family, the Pueblo, members of your nation there, how do they react to this whole situation? Are they sad? Are they angry? Is this a huge part of a religion that's missing?
I think whenever these kinds of sales occur, and it's, I think, important to note that the French example kind of represents an extreme. And there are many of these similar kinds of auctions that we have found and tried to intervene with here in the United States. And so when the Pueblo or the Pueblo members see these kinds of things up for sale, it's very, I think, damaging and very hurtful, not just for the mere fact of seeing the items that otherwise would be secret out there, but because I think, like many of our communities, there's a shared belief that these items have their own life to them. And I think it's, in that emergency hearing, and I think you can probably find it on the internet, where Governor Kurt Riley spoke on behalf of the Pueblo of Acoma. He got very emotional at the end about describing how seeing these kinds of items made him feel. And it's kind of tantamount to a member of your family or a member of your community being stolen away. Mm-hmm. And so I think for the Pueblo, it was very hurtful because there's that such strong belief in that. But at the same time, I think with the efforts that they saw in this, as difficult as it was for a number of complex reasons, I think they're very appreciative to see the efforts made by the Pueblo's leadership, to see the efforts made by the United States, and the number of different tribes that came out in support, and the number of congressional leaders that came out in support. So I think they're very appreciative of that, and I know Governor Kurt Riley's told me that at various events in the past few weeks, there's these little old ladies coming up to him and thanking him for his work and his words, and so I think it's had a widespread effect, not just here at Acoma, but throughout the other tribes in the Southwest.
Well, tribes across the nation have been in the same situation regarding artifacts that were important religiously or historically. I know our own Mvskoke Creek Nation has been through a situation where all of our a huge collection of our history and culture was actually set up on an auction block and was sitting there ready for sale. And luckily, one of our departments was able to get them back and bring them home. And I know it had a wonderful reaction from citizens to see their tangible parts of their history and culture coming back. And so now, which brings us to the point, where is the shield now? Is it back home, or is it still sitting over there?
At this point, it is still sitting in France. We hope that there is an investigation going on in France as to the ownership. The United States is pursuing this on behalf of the Pueblo, and we truly hope that they are successful. We can't really talk about that too much because it is an ongoing federal investigation and federal request for assistance. So we cannot really discuss it, but it is still in France. For Acoma, after our last experience with the French auctions and the French courts, the fact that we were able to get it removed from the sale was in itself a small, minor victory.
What is it about the French? And no aspersions cast, but I think it started back with the Louisiana Purchase when they decided they were going to sell a big chunk of this country to somebody else, and they didn't own the darn thing to begin with. So is the attitude, have you ever heard anything from any of the French people? I mean, has there been some reaction there?
An apology?
Yeah.
We've heard some the French people, I think, are more understanding of the Pueblo's position than the auctioneers. And I think the French government is more understanding, but they're not willing to step in at this point because their culture is very different on this. I just noticed there was a ring of Joan of Arc, who is one of the patron saints of France and who is close to the heart of every French person. And it was on the auction block in England, or it was being sold in England. And no, the French government did not step in and demand its return as an item of cultural patrimony, but a French citizen purchased it for 30 times its value.
Wow.
Because of its importance to France. And that is very similar to the response we got from the auction house itself. So I think it's a point of French culture, maybe, that they don't believe these items are outside the market.
That kind of leaves me stunned on a nation that prides itself on its rich culture and heritage, that they would be so blindly insensitive to that of another nation that has just as strong a culture and history as they do. I mean, gosh, how does it sit with you two?
Well, I will just say Acoma, it's the oldest continually occupied village in the United States. When the Spanish came to New Mexico, they referred to Acoma as a kingdom, recognizing that Acoma had a governmental structure and had lands to which that governmental structure applied. And yes, that governmental structure has been in place for 1,000 years. So the fact that the French do not recognize that is, to me, an incredibly ethnocentric viewpoint that only people from Western Europe can have these kinds of long histories of governmental activity, of being a government and acting as a government. They refuse to recognize that Indian tribes in North America have that kind of history.
And this is Darren again. After the going through this all these steps to get the shield back, and still an ongoing process, where does the Acoma Pueblo, where do they go from here?
We continue to work on this with our congressional delegation. First, Congressman Pierce, who represents Acoma, has introduced House Joint Resolution 122, which is it's called the Protect Patrimony Resolution, and it seeks to make it clear that federal law does not approve of these actions, that the Congress does not approve of these actions, and it seeks additional studies and so that recommendations can be made for further legislation. And what is wonderful is we are working very hard to get congressional hearings on this joint resolution so that tribes can come in and tell Congress just how important this is to them. And we will just state that at this point it's getting a lot of support, a lot of co-signers signing on both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican. Indian country is really coming out in support of it, so we hope that will happen soon.
Well, you've accomplished quite a deal if you can get bilateral support, particularly during an election year like this. Now, you mentioned other tribes.
Other legislation that may happen. And from Senator Heinrich of New Mexico, he is considering introducing amendments to several federal statutes that we rely on in this area and increasing the penalties for violation of those sales. and explicitly prohibiting exportation and of these items. We expect to see something. If he's going to introduce it, it'll probably be in the next 2 weeks. So stay tuned. It will also be something where we will seek to have hearings in the Senate on his bill. So we are working in both the Senate and in the House with our representatives and senators to try and get stronger federal law in this area.
Now, you mentioned other tribes there. Have they really weighed in financially, legally, or in any other sense? National Congress, American Indians, other groups like that?
Yeah, I think part of our efforts this really started last year, and it kind of just so happened that this last auction kind of came up during all this. But the Pueblo has been, I think, working to really, I think, raise this issue amongst tribes, because it will really take a kind of a nationwide response from all of our communities to demand, I think, change from Congress to enhance these kinds of protections for these items. So the Pueblo's been working, I think, they started here in the Southwest. Here in New Mexico, there's 19 Pueblos, and one in Texas. And so they started going small, and they got support from what they call the All Pueblo Council of Governors. So it was representatives, the governors from all of the Pueblos here in New Mexico and Texas, to support enhanced protections for these things, and calling upon Congress to enhance protections for these sacred items. And from that, we've gained a lot of momentum, and last year, the National Congress of American Indians passed a resolution in support of our efforts, supporting the enhanced protection from federal statutes to protect these kinds of sacred items. And so there has been this effort, I think, to take the opportunity that this window represents, because there is beginning to be a lot of attention due to a lot of kind of a nationwide calling from tribes for federal agencies and for Congress to take a hard look at this issue, to see what is currently being done, what kind of shortcomings there are, and where there are opportunities to enhance those protections or create other provisions to stop this illegal market. So there is kind of being we're hoping to get a nationwide look at this. I think the more communities are aware of these things, the more the better. And we hope that maybe your listeners will take a look too at some of these things and see how maybe your own community can fits into this whole framework and this issue.
Oh yeah, with our collection, it brings us awful darn close to what you're dealing with. Perhaps you could take your case to the United Nations also.
The Hopi are doing that, and it's really, no one tribe can afford to do everything. I think that's something people do not realize, how much of an effort financially, emotionally, in every possible way these take, and it's important for tribes to divide up the work. And Hope has been in the lead in taking this issue to the United Nations. They have made several presentations to various organizations within the big United Nations organization on this issue. But international work like that takes time.
Right, and a lot of resources, and no one tribe can bear that burden. In the last minute or so we have here on for this segment, let me ask this weird question, if you will. If you had a magic wand, either of you had a magic wand, and you could make the world change, what would you want to see in regards to the issue of Native American sacred items?
I think it would be, if I had a magic wand, it would not just be American, but it would involve the world. That when something is essential to a culture, the world recognizes that it is the property of that culture to determine who has it, what it is, where it belongs, how to curate it, how to take care of it. I think I feel that every time I see pictures of what has happened to Palmyra in Syria.
God, what a
I think
tragedy.
of Belgian marbles of Greece and France. I mean, in England.
It's odd. It's ironic that you mention that because they did that because of a religious conviction. It's really strange. Aaron, in the last 30 seconds or so, you got a thought on the magic wand there?
Sure. I think, if I'll be a little more specific. If I had a magic wand, I think I would want collectors, dealers, auction houses here in the United States as being kind of the middle point for a lot of these items before they go overseas, to realize that they have an important role that they can have in recognizing that these items are important to our communities, and to themselves taking an active stance in stopping these items from leaving the country.
Ann Rogers, Aaron Sims, you want to say Mado for taking time from your schedule to talk with us about this very important issue. We appreciate you helping inform us. We're going to keep our eyes on it, and who knows, we may be giving you another call at some point.
That sounds great. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Okay. Go. All right, we're going to take a break here and come back. For those of you who are athletically inclined, Darren's got a real treat for you here if you want to get out on a hot, sweaty summer Oklahoma afternoon. So please stay with us here on Mvskoke Radio here on 1240 The Brew.
Who am I? Am I Indian? Just 'cause I'm a girl from the res, don't make things up about me. What if I move away? Then who am I? Some kids try meth just to escape, but then I think about my grandma, my little brother, my beadwork, my poetry, and I think I love who I am, and I know meth is not for me.
Check out ncai.org, a message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Hear that? That's the sound of hope being killed by meth. Methamphetamine use is causing huge problems in our community. Hear that? That's the sound of something you can do about it. Events like rodeo, res ball, and family time can help keep kids away from meth.
Talk to your kids. Keep our culture alive. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Learn more at ncai.org.
Welcome back to 1240 The Brew with Mvskoke Radio. We just had a good conversation with members of the Acoma Pueblo about a shield that they recently got back or are in the process of getting back from an auction that they stopped in Paris. We're going to turn the tables a little bit, and we're going to be speaking to Allison, and I have a hard time saying her last name, so I know she'll correct me on it, but Allison Herrera. How you doing today, Allison?
I'm fine, Darren, and I think you pronounced my last name just fine.
Okay.
Although sometimes I pronounce it Herrera or Herrera. Either one is fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Now, Allison, you're going to be doing. You got an event going with the KOSU Radio. It's called. It's a project called Invisible Nations. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so Invisible Nations is a project that I'm working on with KOSU Radio. KOSU is, of course, the radio station based in Stillwater. They have a signal in Oklahoma City and in Tulsa. And I was hired as an independent producer to work with the station to cover Native American communities in Oklahoma. And I've been slowly but diligently doing just that for the last several months. And it's just been a project that I started in November. I did have been doing radio stories online and on the radio on KOSU, and I've also been working in video with Sterling Harjo's media production company called Fire Thief Productions to do some video profile work as well.
Okay. Now, one of the projects that you're doing or getting ready for is what you're calling a bike tour.
Yep.
And for it's going to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Could you tell us a little bit about the bike tour, and also could you please tell us about what got you inspired to do something such as a bike tour?
Well, Darren, as you noted last week in your article, I do like to. I have a love of cycling. I live in Minneapolis. That's not my hometown, but that's where I call home, being here in Tulsa, between Tulsa and Minneapolis. And I quickly, I noticed that Tulsa is definitely a car city. It's the former oil capital of the world, and so the city is built really for driving. But I would occasionally see cyclists around the city, and then I noticed that a lot of people really like to ride bicycles along the river, and have this huge bicycle race that's coming up this weekend in Tulsa called the Tulsa Tough. And I also noticed and slowly learned about some of the Creek history in Tulsa with the Council Oak Park and the Perrymans, and how a lot of Tulsa were creek allotments. So I think I'm really interested in history. I'm really interested in knowing knowing the history of a town and what came before, the oil industry, what came before the big buildings, what was in this neighborhood before, who lived here, what's their story. And I think Tulsa has a lot of that, especially with the Creek history, because, Okmulgee, the capital, the Creek capital, is just right across the river. So I thought, I'm going to try to combine my love of bicycling with history tours. And I'll tell you one thing. In Minneapolis, bicycling is really big. We have a lot of trails, and people ride on the streets and ride sometimes in the middle of the street. And a friend of mine did this really great thing called, he did a tour of all of the parking lots in the city of St. Paul. And it was a huge draw. And I'm like, while I'm not going to do a bicycle tour history of parking lots, I am going to do something kind of like that. So it's so it's a bicycle tour of Creek history in the city of Tulsa.
Good morning, Allison. This is Gary. How are you?
Fine, Gary. How are you?
Enjoying our wonderful weather that's going to be probably pretty warm when this bike tour takes place. Now, first of all, let's kind of lay out a bit of a parameter here. Now, this tour is how long?
Well, it's about 9 miles in total. And it starts on the edge of the Brady Arts District, right where the 244 freeway is. I should mention that one of our big sponsors for this tour is the Tulsa Hub. And the Tulsa Hub is an organization that promotes change through bicycling. And so they donate used and refurbished bikes to people who need some transportation options and might not be able to, get a car or have a license. And it's sort of their pathway to getting a job, or pathway to getting a car. So they're going to be helping us with this tour, and their warehouse space is at the starting point on 3rd North Lawton.
Okay, well, let me jump in here for someone who knows a zip about bicycles. The last one I rode was one of these old beat-up things with no fenders and patched-up tires, and I think it might have had the old ape hanger handlebars on it.
We call those tricycles.
Yeah.
I'm playing.
I was wondering what that third wheel was for.
Gary, it's a tricycle.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Well,
confusing.
Hey, at my age, I'll settle for it. Now, is this tour the kind of thing that someone who is not really in top physical shape or doesn't know that much about bicycling, is this for them, or would you caution perhaps a little more experience?
There are a couple of hills there in the tour, but we also have a person who will be driving with us. We're possibly going to have a police escort, and we're going to have a couple of people riding along with people to make sure nobody stays behind, or everybody stays safe. So it is a tour where if you haven't been on the bike in a while, it might be a little bit challenging, but I think that there are options for you.
Motorcycle sounds like an option.
Motorcycle. Yeah, you can do a motorcycle.
What day are you having the tour, Allison?
It's Saturday, June 25th, and the tour starts at 10 a.m. At Tulsa Hub location, and we're going to have some live music to kick it off. We're going to have the musical stylings of Desi and Cody, which are a local duo here in Tulsa. It's just going to be them singing an acoustic set for a couple songs, and then we'll take off on our way. And the first stop that we'll be at is the Council Oak Park.
Now, before we go back into the tour, what research did you have to do to get to be able to attain all this information? Where did you go? Who did you talk to?
I talked to a bunch of different people. I talked to David Proctor, who was really an incredible resource and so knowledgeable. Of course, I mean, he is the cultural preservationist for the Mvskoke Creek Nation, and we talked for about an hour about Creek history and about the resettlement and them coming out on the Trail of Tears and the history with the Civil War, and who were the first Creek people to settle in the city of Tulsa and what time. So I talked with him. I've talked with a couple of local preservationists. I did some research at the Minnesota Historical Society. Excuse me, the Tulsa Historical Society. J.D. Colbert, who I met through a fellow reporter and writer for This Land Press in Tulsa. He used him as a source to talk about that area that's right over on where the new gathering place is going to be. He did an article about that and mentioned some Creek settlements in that area. So I talked with him. I looked at allotment maps. I am reading Angie DeBoe's book called From Oil Town to Boom Creek, from Creek Town to Oil Town, the history of Tulsa. And I interviewed Eli Grayson, another really important and knowledgeable person on Creek history. I talked with some of the members of the Maple Ridge Neighborhood Association, because that particular neighborhood has a lot of Creek history, and one of the women that lives in that neighborhood has been doing a lot of research on the houses and a lot of research on, who used to live where. So just between those people, and I've also interviewed, I also talked with Robert Trepp from the Perryman Ranch, who is a descendant of the Perrymans, and of course, incredibly knowledgeable. He's actually going to be one of the tour guides on my tour.
Let me ask you, you mentioned a bit about the route. Does this include the famous Crybaby Hill?
No, it does not include Crybaby Hill. Yes, nobody will be crying, okay?
Or keeling over from exhaustion there.
Yeah.
Now, this tour is taking place right in the midst of a Creek Festival.
Yes,
and,
I know, and that was a big mistake on my part, but, there it is.
Okay, you heard it first on Mvskoke Radio. Somebody admitted a mistake.
I did. I admitted my mistake. Well, I think, I definitely want I want Creek people to come to my tour, obviously. I also want a lot of people to come to the tour. I want not just Creek people, but people that are interested in history. And, I think, one thing is the tour will be available online on iTunes. So if you didn't get to go, you can't make it. If you're busy at the Creek Festival, but you still want to do it, you can, and you can go. I'll send you the link that you guys can put online for where you can download the audio and the podcast to be able to listen. So, and that'll be quite different from the guided tour that we'll have that day.
That's great to know. That rolls into my question. What is the feedback that you're getting whenever you made the announcement about the Tulsa Bike Tour?
People have been really interested. People have been really excited. People have been really excited that the radio station is doing it, because they've never done anything like this before. And I really have to just say a huge thank you to the KOSU staff, because they've just been such a tremendous help and a tremendous support for the tour. So they've been really awesome, and everybody that I've talked to just like, wow, that's really cool, what a great idea. And, it's just led me to think, Darren, when you and I were talking last week about the tour, this isn't by any means the only tour that I want to do. I mean, there's just so much Creek history in Tulsa, and we talked a little bit about how Creek allotments were stolen from Creek citizens, and how shameful that is, and how there is a lot of history that on that end that hasn't been told. And I think that's a really important tour to do, where we can discuss the people that used to live in the city of Tulsa and their allotments, and how their allotments were taken. It's just some of the things that oilmen and prospectors used to do to get the land it was shameful. I mean, there's just no other word for it.
Let me ask you kind of a strange question here. Now, you've been working up in Minneapolis, and I have a lot of really good friends up there. That's the home of the Ojibwe peoples and Lakotas. In your experience, do other tribes know much about the Mvskoke Creek people at all?
Oh,
from your estimate, yeah.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question, Gary? You just cut out just a little bit.
Do other tribes know much about the Mvskoke Creek people? I know you work with the Ojibwe folks up there, and some Dakotas and Lakotas. But in your experience, do other tribes know much about our people here in the Mvskoke Creek Nation?
I don't. You know what? That's a good question, and I would say that they probably know that they were relocated through the Trail of Tears from the southeast. But beyond that, no, I don't think that they know hardly anything. And I think that, you're right that I do work in Minneapolis. I travel back and forth from Minnesota to Tulsa, and that gives me an opportunity to tell people about the work that I'm doing in Oklahoma, and how wonderful it is there, how just about the history of the tribes, and how how interesting it is, and that it really tells the story of Native people in this country.
I'm glad you mentioned Minneapolis. I'll get a plug in. That's where I met my wife, Ramona. So that'll get me in good with her this afternoon. Now, as you go through this tour and wrap it up, what is it that you hope folks will be taking away with them?
I hope that they really come away with a sense of history of the city of Tulsa, of what it used to look and sound like. And if you would allow me, I'd like to read a quote from Angie DeBoe's book. And this for me is a beautiful quote, and it'll definitely be something that's in the audio portion of the tour. She says, and this is in the book from Tulsa, from Creektown to Oil Capital. She writes, "The drum used in the dances was made by stretching a rawhide over the end of a keg. The women dancers also wore on their legs dried terrapin shells filled with stones, which rattled in the rhythm of their steps. They were accompanied by songs with repetitious words and simple melodies that blended into the movement of the dance. For a mile up and down the river could be heard the rhythmic beat of drum and song and dancing and feet. And in the memory of men now living this, and not the roar of traffic or the hum of industry, was the voice of Tulsa." And I really love that quote because I can picture the women with their terrapin shells. I've never been to a stomp dance before. I've never, I've not experienced that, but I can only imagine what that would sound like. And to me, that brings it to life. And, as I walk or drive in the city of Tulsa, I like to imagine that, and I like to imagine those women there among us in the city of Tulsa. And hopefully people will get that sense by being on the tour, and we'll get that sense when they listen to the audio portion of the tour as well.
Well, you can get that sense if you're here Thursday, the 23rd, for
I'm definitely.
The stomp dance is taking place there to kind of kick off the festival, so you can see it in person.
I'm looking forward to coming. I'm definitely looking forward to coming to that.
Since you made the announcement on the radio, we're going to be getting calls about relaying messages to you for you to come to that stomp dance now. So there you go. You're going to make that up. But Allison, we want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day and telling us about this tour that you're going to be doing.
It's it's a pleasure. I'm just so thankful that you asked me to be part of your program, and thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Could you give us the information one more time? Of course, the day, the time, and where you're going to be starting it at.
Yes, it's Saturday, June 25th, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., and that will be we will be sitting at 3rd North Lawton on the edge of the Brady Arts District. If anybody has any questions, you can email me at Allison, Allison, KOSU.org.
Or hopefully they'll just read my article because it has all that information there. So there's a little plug for Mvskoke Media and Mvskoke Nation News.
Definitely.
And Darren DeLon.
Yeah. So Allison, again, thank you very much. We are looking forward to the event, and we're also looking forward to the series of events. This is what's going to be coming from this inaugural one. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya.
You going to check it out? You going to give it a try?
I think I am. I really am. I was going to... I know we have a lot of events during that day, during the festival, of course, but I think a lot of it's being covered by the other great people of our staff. So I'm going to try it. Maybe I can talk to everybody there, see if they can let me just skip out just a little bit and go run up there and get some pictures. I mean, if not, I just wouldn't mind just taking pictures and getting interviews of some people that are participating in the event.
Well, here's something. My wife gave me one of these little GoPro type cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ride, I'll send that camera along with you.
You might see it fall down. Yeah. So we better be careful on that
I
one.
see all these drops of sweat going down.
Exactly. Be fogging it up.
Okay. Well, we got a few minutes here. Let's get on to some community announcements and material here.
I'll start it off.
Okay.
We got a rain garden here Friday, June 10th at Mvskoke Creek Nation Housing Building, the second floor conference room from 9 to 2 by the Mvskoke Food Sovereignty Initiative. The participant limit is 50, and you can register, or if you have any questions, please call 918-549-2588.
Okay, we want to remind folks here in our community that the Mvskoke Creek Nation's Community Clinic is open here. It provides comprehensive family care, primary care, and other kinds of things, and same-day appointments are available. New patients are welcome. So if you want to check it out, it's at the Baker Building, 1201 South Belmont, Suite 207 here in Okmulgee, Monday through Friday, 8 to 12, and then a break for lunch, and then 1 through 5. So if you have any questions or you need help, give them a call, 918-756-5471.
Thank you. I just got a text message about that announcement, so I'm glad you saved me on that one. I have another text for an announcement.
Hey,
the festival,
just like
Tradio, yeah, exactly. The festival golf tournament still has opening for teams for Saturday, June 11th and June 12th, which is this weekend. Please call the Fountainhead Golf Course at 918-689-3209.
Good thing they did that, because I just dropped them from our list.
That was Gary. That was all Gary. That wasn't me.
That was me.
Yeah.
Okay, you didn't want to tackle the Mvskoke there? Here's one. For a beginner Mvskoke guy. The Mvskoke Nation Youth Services Program has extended the deadline for the Manetolgi Onaya Youth Visionary, and these are a set of awards modeled after the Center for Native American Youth's Champion of Change. So if you're interested in nominating a young person, 12 to 24, or a Mvskoke adult, 25 or older, who work with Mvskoke youth, give Nancy Mason a call at 918-549-2557. And I'm sure my Mahayas are going to get on me for blowing that one.
We'll see. They might, go over what. Yeah, they might just go over it. I don't think they'll get on to you. Well, hopefully not. Mvskoke Farmers Market, June 17th from 11 to 1:30. We'll be at the Ofuski Community Garden, Acoma Elders Garden, and other healthy food vendors. To reserve your spot, you need to have it reserved by June 30th. Please call Terry Anderson, 918-732-7699, or Cassandra Thompson, 918-758-8388.
Now, we don't have any other information on specific locations on that farmer's market, so you might want to give those folks a call and find out about where it's going to be taking place. Okay, if you've got anything you need produced from a graphics department, our Mvskoke Media folks have set their deadline for June the 17th to order something for the parade or any other thing you might need for the festival or something like that. So it's June the 17th, And 25% off festival orders, by the way. So you might want to give them a call now, 918-732-7640.
Seminole Nation of Oklahoma Intertribal Council Golf Tournament will be at the Westwood Golf Course in Norman, Oklahoma on July 6th. There's a 72-player limit. For more information on this, please contact 405-257-7272.
Okay, you going to make a lot of events on the festival, or you be covering mostly?
I plan on covering a lot, even though, like, you know, we have certain parts to cover. I've always wanted to take pictures of other places. So yeah, I'll be.
Okay, one real quick thing: our graphics folks will be in the parade, tossing candy and things, and handing out tattoos with our new logo on them. And there's a contest there, so if they see you wearing it in a particular place, a prominent place that's acceptable,
acceptable.
You may be up for a free prize there, so check them out at the parade. That's it. That's all we can do with it today. So Gary Fife, Mado.
Darren DeLon, Mado.
I'm Abu Hedgescott. Thank you for listening to Mvskoke Radio here on 1240 The Brew. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for
everything
more
you
local,
need to
tribal,
know
and community
about
news
1240
and
The Brew is on the Brewhouse website, 1240thebrew.com. 1240 KOKL, Okmulgee, Oklahoma.